Chapter 1. Trail etiquette is a lie. 0 stars. The vibe is budget horror movie, and the air smells like dirt's armpit. Rodey muttered into his phone's voice memos, his voice echoing off the damp, indifferent trees. He tripped over a tree root that felt suspiciously like it had moved just to spite him. To the influencers who said hiking is a personality trait, your mom's a hoe and these boots are a war crime. My blisters have blisters. I'm currently 70% moleskin and 30% pure, unadulterated regret. Rodey was lost. Not the poetic, soul-searching kind of lost, but the I've seen the same weirdly shaped rock 4 times and I'm pretty sure the squirrels are betting on my time of death kind of lost. He stopped to glare at a trail marker that had been splintered in half, possibly by a bear, or perhaps by someone who hated the outdoors as much as he did. Great, abstract expressionist navigation. Does the forest have a manager? Because I'd like to speak to someone about the lack of signage and the abundance of whatever the hell that is. That was a shimmering copper and gold coil blocking the path. It was thick as a telephone pole and stretched into the ferns on both sides of the trail. It looked like a luxury fire hose designed by someone with a god complex and a massive budget for glitter. Rodey, being a professional idiot whose survival instincts had been replaced by a deep-seated need to be mouthy, poked it with the tip of his expensive carbon fiber trekking pole. Is this a fallen art installation? Is it interactive? Do I get a prize if I find the beginning or do I just get? The installation flinched. Before Rodey's brain could process the word muscle, the coil whipped around. A blur of gold and scales lashed out, and fangs the size of steak knives sank into his left calf. Ow! Son of a... Okay, first of all, liability. Do you have insurance? Rodey yelled, stumbling back and clutching his leg. He looked at the puncture wounds with the detached interest of someone who was about to go into shock. I'm calling my lawyer as soon as I get a bar of service, you overgrown shoelace. This is a clear violation of trail etiquette. I have rights. I have a Groupon for a lawyer. The venom hit his system like a triple espresso made of battery acid and liquid lightning. The trees began to melt, turning into neon purple puddles, and the sky started pulsating like a disco ball in a blender. Then, the snake didn't just slither away. It unfolded. The front 10 feet of the creature lifted off the ground, the scales smoothing over into the bronze, muscular torso of a man who looked like he'd been carved out of marble by a sculptor who was clearly going through a thirst trap phase. He was terrifyingly handsome, with golden, slitted eyes and hair that moved like it was underwater. But he wasn't lunging for the kill. Instead, the Naga reached into a hidden leather satchel and pulled out a bottle of Banana Boat SPF 50. Hold still, you hairless calamity, the Naga hissed, his voice a vibrating baritone that rattled Rodey's very marrow. He aggressively squirted a massive glob of white cream onto his palm. Oh, great, Rodey giggled, his brain currently turning into lukewarm gazpacho. The hallucination is a skincare enthusiast. Hey, Sammy? Can I call you Sammy? Your technique is garbage. You're going against the grain. Are you trying to give me a rash or a massage? 0 out of 10 on the spa experience. I want a refund. You are peeling, the Naga barked, leaning in and aggressively smearing the cream across Rodey's face and neck with enough force to nearly snap his head back. Look at these shoulders. You're like wet tissue paper left in a microwave. Why are you out here? Are you a sacrifice? Is this a ritual? Because I don't accept donations in cargo shorts and knockoff boots. I'm finding myself, Rodey shouted, pointing a shaky, uncoordinated finger at the Naga's nose. And apparently, I found a snake with a boundary issue and a savior complex. You're very tall. Do you play basketball? Or are you just a really long scarf with a shitty attitude? Sam-Uel let out a sound that was half hiss, half sob of pure, unadulterated frustration. He didn't even bother to respond to the insult. Instead, he coiled a massive, heavy tail around Rodey's waist, hoisting him up into the air against a chest that was way too firm and way too warm to be a fever dream. We are going to my domain, Sam growled, his hood flaring slightly in irritation, where I can keep you from walking into a ravine like the sentient disaster you are. I cannot have you dying on my trail. The paperwork for a human expiration is a nightmare. Ooh, a kidnapping, Rodey swooned, his head lolling onto Sam's shoulder as the venom-induced euphoria took the wheel. So retro. So Beauty and the Beast, but with more scales and less singing furniture. Is there a gift shop? I'm not leaving without a keychain, Sammy. My mom collects them. Be silent, biped. Sam hissed, his tail tightening. Or I'll let the venom finish the job. You're so dramatic, Rodey whispered as the world finally went black. We should get Margs later. Chapter 2. Venom, Consent, and SPF 50. Rodey wasn't just hallucinating anymore. He was the lead actor in a high-budget fever dream directed by a sadist. The world felt like it was made of velvet and vibrating tuning forks. As Sam-Uel glided through the forest, or perhaps through a rip in the fabric of space-time, Rodey felt the air grow thick, smelling less like pine needles and more like old coins and ozone. You're vibrating, Rodey slurred, his cheek pressed against Sam's shoulder. Are you a snake or a very large electric toothbrush? Because I've got a molar that's been acting up, and if you're offering service, I've got a dental plan you wouldn't believe. Peace, little meat, Sam growled, his tail thumping rhythmically against the ground. Your blood is singing with my venom. If I don't anchor you soon, your consciousness will drift into the ether, and I'll be left with a very expensive, very useless corpse. He dropped Rodey onto a bed of glowing moss that pulsed with a faint, heartbeat-like rhythm. It was soft, but it felt alive, like lying on a pile of warm tongues. Rodey groaned, trying to sit up, but his limbs were currently functioning like overcooked fettuccine. Anchor me? Is that the new term for ghosting? Rodey giggled, his eyes unfocused. Listen, Sammy, I've been through a lot of bad breakups, but anchoring sounds like a long-term commitment I didn't sign up for. I'm more of a 3-month trial period guy. Can we just be casual? Maybe I stay in my dimension, you stay in your hole, and we meet up for drinks on the equinox. Sam-Uel ignored him. He raised a hand, and the air split open like a ripe fruit. From the tear emerged a scroll of black parchment that dripped with liquid shadows. It didn't look like a legal document. It looked like a curse that had been to law school. This is the sacrament of the scales, Sam hissed, his voice dropping into a range that made Rodey's lungs vibrate. A binding of souls, a claim of protection. It is the only way to counteract the neurotoxin currently melting your brain. Sign it or become part of the mulch. Ooh, a contract, Rodey smirked, reaching out with a hand that was turning a worrying shade of plum. Is there a student discount? Does this come with dipping sauces? I don't sign anything without a side of ranch, Sammy. It's in my rider, and I want the delivery time guaranteed. 30 minutes or the marriage is free. It is not a pizza order, Sam roared, his hood flaring with a violent flash of gold. It is your life. Sign it with your blood, you mouthy primate. Fine, fine. So pushy, Rodey huffed. He took a jagged stone from the moss and dragged it across his thumb with a dramatic wince. The things I do for a hallucination. You're lucky you're pretty. Rodey smeared a messy, crimson smiley face across the bottom of the black parchment. He even added a little wink. The moment the blood touched the surface, the comedy died. The scroll didn't roll back up. It disintegrated into a cloud of obsidian dust that swirled around Rodey's neck like a swarm of angry hornets. It burned. A cold, piercing frost that sank deep into his skin. A black, serpentine brand began to etch itself around his throat, glowing with a faint, sickly light. The forest went silent. Not a peaceful quiet. A vacuum sucking the air out of a room, kind of quiet. Sam-Uel went deathly still. His pupils dilated until his eyes were two bottomless pits of black oil. The irritation was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating realization. Oh, Rodey whispered, feeling the weight of the brand settle into his marrow. That's the look. I know that look. That's the I accidentally signed up for a 24-month gym membership face. Strong, silent type. Huh? That always ends well in the movies. usually involves a lot of brooding and a tragic backstory. Can I get a refund, or are we till death do us part? Because I have a very busy schedule of being a disappointment to my parents. You signed the unabridged version, Sam whispered, his voice trembling with a dark, tectonic power. The eternal coil, not the protection right, the bond. Sounds like a brand of luxury mattresses, Rodey quipped, though his chest was beginning to feel like it was being crushed by an invisible boa constrictor. Does it come with a 10-year warranty? Or do I just get the I'm stuck with a relic package? The ground suddenly gave way. The world didn't just fold. It snapped like a bone. The sky turned into a ceiling of jagged obsidian, and the smell of pine was replaced by the cloying, metallic scent of ancient blood and damp stone. Welcome home, Consort, Sam growled, his eyes narrowing as he watched Rodey's face. Sweetheart, Rodey wheezed as the floor of the underworld rushed up to meet him. If you wanted a second date, you could have just texted. Chapter 3. Welcome to IKEA. Please don't run. Rodey woke up with a headache that felt like a tectonic plate shift. He opened one eye and immediately wished he hadn't. He was lying on a low-profile, moss-covered platform that looked suspiciously like a $400 Scandinavian bed frame. The room was infinite. It was a sprawling, subterranean cavern filled with curated clusters of stone furniture, glowing fungal lamps, and waterfalls that flowed upward. It was minimalist. It was chic. It was a nightmare. Oh, great, Rodey croaked, sitting up and immediately clutching his ribs. I've died and gone to the flagship store in hell. Where's the cafeteria? If I'm trapped in an eternal showroom, I at least deserve a plate of horse meat meatballs and a lingonberry soda. It is called the Joga's Suite, a voice hissed from the shadows. Sam-Uel glided into the light, his scales polished to a terrifying sheen. He held a piece of slate that looked like a legal tablet. He looked like he hadn't slept in a decade, or perhaps he'd just spent the last hour reading the fine print of Rodey's soul. The what? Is that the name of the suite or the sound you make when you're choking on a hairball? Rodey shot back, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. His cargo shorts were shredded, but his sass was intact. And why are you looking at me like I'm a bill you can't pay? I'm the victim here. I was minding my own business, insulting nature, and you decided to turn me into a permanent resident. You are more than a resident, Sam said, his voice dropping an octave into a range that made Rodey's teeth ache. By signing the sacrament of the scales, you have been elevated. You are now the consort of the Copperhead Coast. You are legally, spiritually, and biologically bound to the lineage of the Great Coil. Rodey stared at him. Then he let out a sharp, bark-like laugh. Consort? Is that like an intern with benefits? Do I get a badge? Can I use it to get out of jury duty? Because I'm telling you now, Sammy, I am a terrible spouse. I leave wet towels on the floor, I forget anniversaries, and I will absolutely eat your leftovers when you're not looking. It is not a choice, Sam growled, slithering closer until his face was inches from Rodey's. The smell of cold rain and ozone was suffocating. The bond is a parasite. It feeds on our proximity. If you leave, your heart will literally stop beating. If I reject you, my scales will rot from my body. We are a closed loop. Rodey's grin didn't falter, but his eyes went cold. So it's a subscription service I can't cancel. Modern romance is truly dead. What about the divorce clause? There's always a loophole. Does it involve a lawyer, or do we just have to fight to the death over who gets the good pillows? Sam's expression shifted into something grim and hollow. The only way the bond dissolves is if one of us is consumed. Entirely. Not just the flesh but the essence. You would have to eat my heart, or I would have to swallow your soul. Rodey paused, a manic glint in his eyes. He let out a long, wheezing laugh that echoed through the cavern. Oh, that's perfect. That's the most metal thing I've ever heard. So, the marriage counseling for this dimension is basically just cannibalism? I love it. It's so efficient. No messy paperwork, just a light snack. He stood up, wobbling on his feet, and poked Sam's hard, muscular chest. Well, start seasoning me, big guy, because I'm going to be a real pain in the ass. Where's the exit? I want to go find the reduced to clear section of this hellscape and see if I can find a reason to live that doesn't involve being your scaly +1. Sam's tail whipped around, pinning Rodey against a stone pillar with a force that knocked the breath out of him. The Naga's eyes were pitch black now, the comedy of the situation dying a swift, brutal death. There is no exit, Rodey. There is only the coast. And you are going to learn to hiss, or you are going to learn how quiet the dark can be. Rodey gasped for air, his face turning red, but he still managed to smirk. Is this the part where you tell me you're the one who wears the pants? Because I have news for you, Sammy. You don't even have legs. Chapter 4. I am not your kindergarten teacher. Rodey waited exactly 10 minutes after Sam-Uel slithered away to consult the elders before he decided to stage a breakout. He didn't have a map, he didn't have shoes, and his left leg felt like it had been through a wood chipper, but he had an abundance of spite. Spite was a renewable resource. Archive this, you oversized belt, Rodey muttered, limping out of the Joga's suite. The Underworld was a topographical nightmare. Every hallway looked like the inside of a giant's digestive tract, lined with glowing moss and shifting shadows. He reached a four-way intersection where the walls were covered in pulsating, serpentine runes that looked like a bowl of alphabet soup having a seizure. Okay, Siri, find the way out of this bad trip, Rodey whispered to his dead phone. He looked at a sign that was just a squiggle with teeth. Great. I need to hiss for directions? No, absolutely not. I am not doing reptile ASMR for a GPS. I have standards. I'm a biped. I'll find the exit using logic and my innate sense of, oh look, a shiny thing. He followed a trail of glowing pebbles into a sunken cavern that was decidedly not the exit. It was a pit filled with hundreds of neon green hatchlings, each about the size of a pool noodle. They stopped wriggling the moment they smelled him. Hi, don't mind me. Just a tourist looking for the gift shop, Rodey said, backing away. The hatchlings didn't attack. Instead, they let out a collective high-pitched chirp and began to swarm toward him, coiling around his ankles like overeager puppies. Whoa, personal space. I'm not a jungle gym, Rodey yelled, trying to shake a lime-green snake off his shin. Listen, you little linguini rejects. I am not your mother. I am not your kindergarten teacher. I am a disgruntled captive with a very low tolerance for group activities. He started walking, hoping to shake them off, but the parade only grew. Every step he took, more snakes joined. He looked like the Pied Piper of Petco. Fine. If you're coming, you need names, Rodey barked, pointing at a particularly bitey one on his wrist. Your tax fraud. Your disappointment. And the one on my shoulder? Your lactose intolerance. If we're going to overthrow this regime, we're doing it with a solid brand identity. He reached a grand plaza where several Naga nobles were gathered, discussing whatever it is snakes discuss. Likely heat lamps and the price of high-grade rodents. The sight of a disheveled human covered in royal hatchlings brought the entire conversation to a screeching halt. Rodey didn't stop. He marched right through the center of them, his makeshift army trailing behind him. Excuse me, coming through. Union meeting in progress, Rodey shouted. We're protesting the lack of legroom and the mandatory marriage contracts. If anyone wants to join the strike, tax fraud over here will take your information. A shadow fell over the plaza. The air temperature dropped 20 degrees. Sam-Uel appeared. His hood flared so wide it blocked out the fungal light. He looked less like a husband and more like a god of localized apocalypses. Rodey, Sam's voice vibrated through the floorboards of Rodey's soul. What are you doing with the royal brood? I'm unionizing them, Sam. These kids are living in a pit. They need enrichment. They need toys that aren't made of stone. Rodey yelled, gesturing to the snake wrapped around his neck. Lactose intolerance here says he wants a career in musical theater. But you're stifling him with all this ancient lineage crap. Sam-Uel glided forward, his tail snapping against the stone like a whip. The nobles began to whisper, their voices a cacophony of dry leaves rubbing together. You have interfered with the nursery, Sam hissed. his hand gripping Rodey's shoulder hard enough to bruise. To touch the young is to claim the lineage. You are making a public spectacle of our bond. Good. Maybe then someone will tell me where the exit is. Sam didn't answer. Instead, he pulled Rodey into the center of the plaza and bit his own thumb, smearing a line of dark, cold blood across Rodey's forehead. The crowd gasped. "He is mine," Sam announced, his voice echoing with a dark, terrifying possessiveness. "He is the consort. He is the father of the coil. Touch him, and I will feed your bones to the abyss." Rodey wiped the blood out of his eye and looked at the terrified nobles, then back at Sam. "Father of the coil? Seriously? We haven't even had a first date and you're already putting me on the PDA." Rodey smirked, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Also, you missed a spot with the blood. If we're doing a ritual, let's have some symmetry, Sammy. You're such a drama queen." Sam leaned in close, his fangs grazing Rodey's ear. "Keep talking, Rodey," Sam whispered. "Every word you say just makes the cage smaller." "Joke's on you," Rodey wheezed. "I'm an expert at living in small spaces. Have you seen the cost of a studio in the city?" Chapter 5. Meet the Mother. If Sam-Uel was a localized apocalypse, his mother was the heat death of the universe. They didn't go to a house. They went to a cathedral made of calcified regret and architectural spite. The walls were lined with statues of people who looked like they'd been caught mid-sneeze or mid-argument. Rodey, still covered in a few lingering green hatchlings that refused to leave their new union leader, marched in like he was heading to a HR meeting he intended to burn down. "Sammy, I've seen this movie," Rodey whispered, eyeing a stone guy whose face was frozen in a permanent, "I left the stove on" expression. "If she turns me into a lawn ornament, I want to be positioned near the pool. I have a very specific, tan line aesthetic I'd like to maintain for eternity." "Be silent," Sam hissed, his scales rattling with a sound that was dangerously close to a whimpering dog. "My mother is the matriarch of the Stone Eye. She does not care about your tan lines. She cares about the purity of the Copperhead line, which you are currently mocking with those pockets." At the end of the hall, sitting on a throne of intertwined vipers, was Marge, or, as the Underworld called her, the Medusa. She wasn't wearing a veil. Her hair was a writhing, hissing nest of obsidian black cobras, each one looking at Rodey with more judgment than a French waiter at a fast food joint. She didn't speak. She just looked. It was a gaze that felt like being hit with a pressure washer filled with liquid nitrogen. Rodey felt his soul shrivel. His internal organs tried to file for a change of address. But his mouth was a runaway train with no brakes. "Wow," Rodey said, breaking the suffocating silence. "The hair is bold. Is that a no-poo method? How do you keep the tangles out? Do they ever fight over which way you're going? Or do you have a lead cobra who makes the executive decisions? Also, I think tax fraud over here on my shoulder is related to your left temple." Same judgmental eyes. Sam-Uel made a sound like a punctured tire. Medusa leaned forward. Her hair snakes hissed in a terrifying, synchronized wave. "It is fleshy," she said, her voice sounding like grinding boulders. "It is loud. It is covered in the royal brood." "Sam-Uel, why have you brought this leaking, bipedal error into my sanctum?" "He is the consort, Mother," Sam said, bowing so low his forehead touched the stone. "The bond is sealed. He looks like he would break if I sat a heavy book on him," Medusa noted, her eyes narrowing as she scanned Rodey's cargo shorts. "Does he lay eggs? Is he nutrient-dense? Will he provide the line with strength? Or is he just a noisy, temporary pet?" "Excuse me, Marge? Can I call you Marge?" "No? Too bad," Rodey interjected, crossing his arms. "I'm not a pet. I'm a liability. And as for grand eggs, do they come with an assembly manual or a warranty? Because I'm pretty sure I'm biologically incapable of laying anything other than a sarcastic comment. If you're looking for a broodmare, you've picked the wrong species. I'm more of a disappointing son-in-law vibe." The snakes on Medusa's head all recoiled at once, then surged forward, baring fangs. Sam-Uel looked ready to faint. Medusa stared at Rodey for a long, agonizing minute. Then, the corners of her stone-cold mouth twitched. "He has no fear," she whispered. "He is utterly, hopelessly unmanageable. I haven't seen anything this annoying since the Great Mongoose War of '84. I try," Rodey smirked, though his knees were currently vibrating like a blender. "I like him," Medusa announced, the sound echoing like a death knell. "He is a disaster. He will keep the court distracted while we consolidate power. Keep him, Sam-Uel. But if he pees on the rug, I'm turning him into a hat rack." Sam-Uel looked betrayed. "Mother, you're supposed to help me control him." "Control?" Medusa laughed, a sound like glass breaking in a velvet bag. "You've married a hurricane, my son. Good luck with the insurance claim." Rodey winked at one of the hair snakes. "Hear that, Sammy? I'm officially mother-approved. Now, Marge, let's talk about the catering. I've had nothing but moss and venom for 24 hours, and if I don't get something with carbs, I'm going to start biting people back. I could pretend I don't care about likes and subscriptions. I could say, watch if you want, no pressure. That would be a lie. I care deeply, emotionally, spiritually, algorithmically. So if this video entertained you in any way, please like and subscribe. It helps this channel grow, helps this content reach people who actually want it, and helps me justify making another one instead of questioning my life choices at 3 a.m. Chapter 6. Anatomy is a storage problem. The Joga suite was currently bathed in the dim, pulsing violet of the fungal lamps. Rodey was sitting on the edge of the stone bed, trying to use a sharpened piece of slate to cut a loose thread on his cargo shorts. He felt Sam-Uel's presence before he heard him. A heavy, sliding weight that made the floorboards of the cavern groan. "We need to discuss the logistical synchronization of the bond," Sam-Uel rumbled. He was looming in the corner, looking less like a disgruntled IKEA manager and more like a predator who had finally realized he trapped something he didn't know how to handle. Rodey didn't look up. "Logistical synchronization? Is that the part where we share a pint of Ben and Jerry's and talk about our feelings? Because I'm warning you, my feelings are 40% spite and 60%. I want a cheeseburger." "The bond requires physical alignment," Sam said, his tail coiling and uncoiling with a restless, muscular snap. "If we do not synchronize, the magic will begin to eat your nervous system, and I have a duty to ensure my consort is functional." Sam slithered closer, his human half looming over Rodey. With a slow, deliberate movement, he shed the ceremonial silk wrap he wore over his lower half, the transition point where the man stopped and the monster began. Rodey looked. He looked for a long time. The silence stretched into a minute. Rodey's eyes went wide, then narrowed, then wide again. He leaned forward, squinting, like a man trying to read the fine print on a particularly confusing lease agreement. "Okay," Rodey said, his voice remarkably steady for someone staring at a biological anomaly. "Sammy, we need to talk about the equipment. Why are there two?" Sam-Uel stiffened, his hood flaring in a mix of pride and deep, scaly embarrassment. "It is a biological necessity for the Naga lineage. We are creatures of redundancy, Rodey. Efficiency is the cornerstone of the Copperhead Coast." "Efficiency?" Rodey barked a laugh, standing up and pacing the small stone rug. "This isn't efficiency, this is a storage problem. This is a zoning violation. Are you telling me that while I'm working with a single-occupancy studio apartment, you're rocking a duplex? Does this require a specialized permit? Is there a tax bracket for this?" "It is a gift," Sam hissed, his tail lashing out and knocking over a stone vase. "It is the mark of a high lord. It's a crowd, Sam. It's a group chat." Rodey gestured wildly. "I was prepared for a lot of things. I was prepared for the venom, the kidnapping, and the mother with the snake hair. I was even prepared for the fact that you don't have a butt. But two, I'm going to need a whiteboard. I'm going to need a protractor and a glass of bourbon just to understand the physics of this." Sam-Uel glided forward, pinning Rodey against the cold cavern wall. The air between them was thick with the scent of ozone and Sam's sheer, mounting frustration. "It is not a math problem, Rodey. It is a biological reality. You are my consort. You will adapt. Adapt? Sammy, I'm a human, not a transformer. Rodey wheezed, staring up into those slitted gold eyes. I have limits. I have structural integrity to maintain. You can't just show up with a buy one, get one free special and expect me not to ask about the return policy. Rodey reached out, tentatively poking Sam's bronze chest. Also, do they have names? Is it like a good cop, bad cop situation? Because if I have to negotiate with a committee every time things get steamy, I'm going to need a union rep present. Sam-Uel let out a sound that was half hiss, half strangled groan. He leaned his forehead against Rodey's, his scales cold against Rodey's heated skin. You are the most infuriating creature in any dimension, and you're a biological overachiever. Rodey smirked, his sass finally returning to full power. Now, put the twins away for a second and tell me, do you have any snacks in this showroom? Because I can't handle a duplex situation on an empty stomach. Chapter 7. Consort. Unfortunately, the honeymoon phase, if you could call being legally bound to a reptile in a basement a honeymoon, was officially over. Rodey was now expected to perform consort duties, which apparently involved a lot of standing around and looking decorative. The first hurdle, however, was physics. Rodey stood at the base of the Great Ascent, a 300-foot incline leading to the High Council chamber. It wasn't a staircase. It was a perfectly smooth, polished obsidian ramp. You've got to be kidding me, Rodey panted, his thighs burning as he attempted to power walk up the 45-degree angle. He looked like a glitching video game character, his sneakers squeaking desperately against the stone. Beside him, Sam-Uel glided upward with the effortless grace of an escalator made of muscle. He didn't even look winded. Keep pace, Rodey. We are expected, Sam urged, glancing back as Rodey did a frantic, sweaty little shuffle to avoid sliding backward. Oh, look at you, Sam. Look at the efficiency, Rodey hissed, stopping to wipe sweat from his brow. I'm over here burning 400 calories just to go to the bathroom while you're basically a living, moving walkway. Must be nice to be a sentient noodle. Next time I'm bringing a skateboard and a tow rope. This is bipedal discrimination. Part 2: The heat lamp addiction. By the time they reached the top, Rodey was in a foul mood. To compensate for the chilly underworld air, Sam had installed a high-end, industrial-strength heat lamp in the waiting lounge. 48 hours later, Rodey had become a lizard. Sam walked into the lounge to find Rodey draped over a stone bench, wrapped in a fleece snuggie, staring blankly into the orange glow. He looked like a very grumpy, very warm burrito. Rodey, the council is ready. We must discuss the border skirmishes with the constrictors, Sam said, reaching for the lamp. Don't you touch that dial, Sammy? Rodey whispered, not moving an inch. The light is my god now. I can feel my blood turning into syrup, and it's the only thing keeping me from committing a homicide. Tell the vipers that the king of the sun lamp is napping. If they want to talk war, they can come sit in the toast zone with me. Part 3: The shower scandal. Rodey finally made it to the communal stone baths, where he spent an hour aggressively exfoliating. When he left, a small pile of dead skin cells remained on the bench. 5 minutes later, the palace was in a state of high alert. Sam-Uel burst into the bedroom, accompanied by 3 royal medics carrying jars of leeches and enchanted moss. Rodey, you're disintegrating. Why didn't you tell me the venom was causing a systemic collapse? Rodey, who was mid-moisturizing, stared at the panic-stricken Naga. What are you talking about? I'm fine. The bath. You left pieces of yourself behind. It's dust, Rodey. You're shedding in dust form. Your structural integrity is failing. Sam yelled, his tail whipping around in a frenzy. It's called exfoliating, you overpolished belt. Rodey snapped, waving a bottle of lotion. I'm not dying. I'm glowing. Maybe if you used some salicylic acid once in a while, you wouldn't be so cranky every time your skin gets tight. It's called skincare. Look it up in your dusty archives. Part 4: The petting incident. The actual meeting with the High Council was a disaster. Lord Vesper, A king cobra with a hood the size of a satellite dish was droning on about human impurities. Rodey was bored. Extremely bored. He sat next to Sam, watching the way Sam's human torso merged into his golden coils. He noticed a small, sensitive-looking patch of scales right at the base of Sam's spine. Boredom took over. Rodey reached out and started absent-mindedly scratching the sweet spot with his fingernails. The effect was instantaneous. Sam-Uel, the terrifying prince of the coast, let out a soft mlem as his tongue flopped out of his mouth. His eyes rolled back, and his massive tail began to thump rhythmically against the floor like a golden retriever waiting for a treat. Thump, thump, thump. The council went silent. Lord Vesper's jaw dropped. Sam-Uel, Vesper hissed. Are you thumping? Rodey didn't stop scratching. He leaned back and shrugged at the horrified nobles. What? He's a good boy. Who's a good apocalypse? You are. Yes, you are. Sam let out a long, blissed-out hiss, completely oblivious to his shredded reputation. Rodey? Sam whimpered, his dignity leaving his body in real time. Don't. Stop. See. Rodey smirked at the council. I think the meeting is adjourned. The prince needs a nap and a belly rub. Chapter 8. The Polite Threat. The great gala of the Gilded Fong was supposed to be Rodey's coming-out party. In reality, it was just a giant room filled with 12-foot predators wearing enough jewelry to sink a battleship. Rodey was dressed in a silk tunic that Sam had insisted on, though Rodey had insisted back by wearing his beat-up Converse underneath. He looked like a runaway groom from a very niche fantasy wedding. Remember, Sam hissed into his ear, his tail twitching with anxiety. When Lord Vesper enters, you lower your head. It is a sign of respect for the Great Hood. He is the oldest king cobra in the coast. His ego has its own gravity. A king cobra? What, is he the CEO of the forest? Rodey asked, picking a piece of dried moss off his sleeve. I don't bow for CEOs, Sammy. I didn't even bow for my landlord when he fixed the toilet. Unless this Vesper guy is bringing me a tray of pigs in a blanket, my neck stays vertical. The heavy obsidian doors swung open. Lord Vesper glided in. He was massive, bone-white scales, a hood that looked like a throne made of skin, and eyes that moved like slow-motion emeralds. The entire room went silent, 100 Nagas hitting the floor in a synchronized wave of submission. Even Sam lowered his torso until his forehead was inches from the marble. Rodey, however, remained standing. He actually leaned a little to the left to get a better look at Vesper's jewelry. Nice necklace, Vesp, Rodey called out, his voice echoing in the dead-silent hall. Is that gold-plated or solid? Because it looks like it's giving you some serious neck strain. Maybe look into a chiropractor. I know a guy in Queens, but he doesn't do house calls in whatever dimension this is. Vesper froze. His hood flared out with a sound like a silk umbrella opening. He towered over Rodey, his shadow swallowing the human whole. The thing speaks, Vesper hissed, the sound vibrating in Rodey's chest. Sam-Uel, your pet has a defective spine. It does not bend. He's not a pet, he's a consort. Sam groaned from the floor, sounding like he wanted to dissolve into the grout. Rodey, for the love of the great coil, look at your shoes. Look at anything but him. I'm looking at him fine, Rodey said, crossing his arms and popping his gum. And I'm not bowing. My back is held together by caffeine and spite. If I bend that far, something's going to snap, and I don't think your royal medics carry ibuprofen. Vesper leaned down, his fangs glinting inches from Rodey's face. You dare stand before a king? You are a bipedal accident, a mistake of biology. And you're a belt that grew a head. Rodey shot back, not flinching. Listen, Vesp, I get it. You're the big snake on campus. But in my world, king is just a title we give to guys who sell overpriced burgers or singers with questionable sideburns. You want to bow? Do something impressive. Catch a frisbee. Balance a ball on your nose. Then we'll talk. The room inhaled a collective gasp so sharp it created a vacuum. Vesper's eyes turned a violent, glowing red. Sam-Uel, he whispered, his voice a promise of genocide. Your consort has declared war on the old blood. By sunset tomorrow, the Copperhead Coast will be a graveyard. I will turn your human into a pair of very small, very loud boots. Vesper turned and swept out of the room, his tail shattering a stone pillar on the way out. Rodey watched him go, then looked down at Sam, who was still face down on the floor, vibrating with pure dread. Well, Rodey said, patting Sam's head. That went better than expected. He seemed sensitive, didn't he? Also, did you see his tail? Total overcompensator. So what's for dinner? I'm thinking something that isn't mouse-flavored. Sam slowly looked up, his face a mask of utter despair. You just started a civil war, Rodey. A global, multi-generational conflict. Because you wouldn't tilt your head 10 degrees. 10 degrees is a lot for a Tuesday, Sam, Rodey shrugged. Besides, your mom said I was unmanageable. I'm just staying on brand. Now, let's go find that heat lamp. I'm starting to feel a chill, and I want to be nice and toasty for the apocalypse. I enjoyed writing this. If you did too, please consider liking, sharing, or leaving a comment. Anything that helps the algorithm. Thank you for listening. Chapter 9, Holy Mother of Snakes. Medusa didn't do gentle suggestions. She did biological ultimatums that felt like a death sentence. Rodey was currently huddled under his industrial heat lamp, vibrating at a frequency that could liquefy bone, when the matriarch slithered into the room. Her hair snakes were all wearing tiny, identical expressions of maternal hunger, their little tongues flickering in a synchronized wave of, "Where are the grandbabies?" "The war has started," Medusa announced, her voice like a shovel hitting a grave. "The old blood is coming. My son is currently outside sharpening his fangs on a boulder. And yet, I see no evidence of a nursery expansion." Rodey squinted through his warm-drunk haze, clutching his snuggie tighter. "Marge, we've talked about this. I'm a human. I don't do clutches. I don't even like group chats with more than 4 people. If you're looking for a brood, go buy a carton of grade a large and call it a day. I'm a one-man show." Medusa leaned over him, her shadow eclipsing the heat lamp. One of her hair snakes reached down and flicked its tongue against Rodey's forehead, tasting his fear. Tasted like caffeine and audacity. "You have 24 hours to produce something that chirps," she hissed, her eyes glowing with a faint, petrifying light. "I want a grand egg that has your level of annoying audacity but my son's ability to actually kill things. If I do not see a swelling in the lineage, I will turn your lower half into a permanent stone pedestal. You won't need to worry about the leg-length privilege if you're a decorative pillar in the foyer." "Is that a threat or a home renovation pitch?" Rodey wheezed, his heart doing a frantic tap dance. "Because I'm telling you, I'm not a PEZ dispenser. You can't just tilt my head back and expect a baby snake to pop out. Biology is a thing, Marge. I have a skeleton. It's fixed. It doesn't expand for festive occasions. I have already prepared the incubation sands," Medusa continued, ignoring his protest with the practiced ease of a mother-in-law who has already decided the wedding colors. "They are heated to exactly 104 degrees. If you are not in them, providing the coast with its next disaster by the lunar shift, I will find a way to make you lay an egg through sheer terrified will. I have ancient spells, Rodey. Most of them involve internal petrification and a very long shoehorn." Rodey stared at her, his sass momentarily paralyzed by the mental image. "A shoehorn, Marge? Really? That's the most specific threat I've ever heard. You're telling me you're going to magic a baby out of me like some kind of cursed circus act?" "I am telling you," Medusa whispered, her snakes baring their fangs in unison, "that I am a grandmother without a grandchild, and that makes me more dangerous than 1,000 king cobras. Either start nesting or start practicing your statue pose. I think you'd look lovely in the garden, holding a bird bath and looking vaguely disappointed." She swept out of the room, leaving the scent of ozone and baby powder behind. Rodey sat in the silence for a moment, then turned to the empty doorway. Sammy, your mom is talking about shoehorns again. I'm taking the heat lamp and I'm locking the door. If anyone comes in here without a negative pregnancy test and a pizza, I'm unionizing the dust bunnies and we're going on strike." Chapter 10. The stone-cold truth. Between the shoehorn threats from Marge and the ghost of the gulp, trying to renovate his ribcage, Rodey's grip on reality was beginning to slip. He was currently in a state of high-alert nesting, driven by 48 hours of industrial-strength heat lamp exposure and a very genuine fear of his mother-in-law's magical pottery skills. When he woke up that morning, he felt it. Tucked into the corner of his moss bed, right under the orange glow of the lamp, was a perfectly oval, bone-white, impossibly smooth object. It was heavy. It was warm. It was beautiful. "Oh my God," Rodey whispered, his eyes welling up with warm, drunk tears. "It happened. I'm a medical marvel. I'm a PZ dispenser after all." He didn't call Sam. He didn't call a doctor. He immediately went into full Papa Penguin mode. He tucked the object into the front of his snuggie, right against his stomach, and sat back down under the lamp. He began to hum a soft, slightly off-key version of Stayin', alive to encourage the shell-dweller within. 3 hours later, Sam-Uel slithered into the suite, looking like he'd just finished a 12-hour shift of yelling at guards. He stopped dead when he saw Rodey. Rodey was sitting in a heap of shredded silk, his face flushed, his eyes wild, protectively cradling a lump in his shirt. "Rodey?" Sam asked, his tail twitching in confusion. "Why are you vibrating? And why is the room smelling like singed fleece?" "Shoo!" Rodey hissed, clutching the lump tighter. "Don't wake him, Sam. He's sensitive. He's got my eyes and your lack of a retirement fund. He's a miracle." Sam-Uel glided closer, his brow furrowed. "Who is a miracle? What are you talking about?" "The egg, Sam. The egg," Rodey shouted, carefully pulling the bone-white object out of his snuggie to show him. "Your mom must have snuck in and used the shoehorn magic while I was napping. Look at him. He's so smooth. He's going to be the most aerodynamic disaster this coast has ever seen." Sam-Uel stared at the object. His pupils thinned into microscopic needles. A slow, painful realization washed over his face. "Rodey," Sam started, his voice cracking. That is a Sunstone 3000. "A what?" "It's a heating rock," Sam said, reaching out a hesitant hand. "I bought it for you yesterday because you complained the bed was too cold. It's a piece of basalt infused with thermal magic. It doesn't have a heartbeat, Rodey. It has a high and medium setting." Rodey looked down at the baby. He looked at Sam. He looked back at the rock. He tapped the surface with his fingernail. It didn't chirp. It didn't wiggle. It just emitted a consistent, comforting 102 degrees of dry heat. The silence in the room was deafening. "So," Rodey said, his voice dropping an octave, "what you're saying is, I've been singing disco hits to a space heater for 3 hours. You were very committed," Sam offered, trying and failing to suppress a smile. "I've never seen anyone nurture a mineral with such intensity. I am a victim of circumstance." Rodey yelled, stood up, and ceremoniously dropped the rock back onto the moss. "I'm under a lot of pressure, Sam. Your mom is basically threatening to turn me into a gargoyle if I don't produce a grandson. And my brain is currently the consistency of a melted slushie. I saw a white oval and I assumed the worst." Sam-Uel started to chuckle. The chuckle turned into a full-bodied, scale-rattling laugh. He coiled around Rodey, pulling the blushing human into his chest. "You would be a terrible mother, Rodey. You tried to hatch a piece of geology." "Shut up, Sammy." At least he was quiet. Rodey grumbled, leaning into the warmth. "And for the record, if that rock had hatched, it would have been the best damn rock snake in the kingdom. Now, if you tell your mom about this, I'm telling the High Council about the petting incident. Understand?" "My lips are sealed," Sam promised, though he was still vibrating with suppressed laughter. "But maybe we should turn the lamp down. You're starting to smell like a toasted marshmallow." "I like being a marshmallow," Rodey muttered. "Marshmallows don't have to fight king cobras." Chapter 11. The Honeymoon, Terms and Conditions Apply. After the great egg debacle of 2026, Sam-Uel reached a breaking point. He realized that if he didn't get Rodey out of the claustrophobic, humid tunnels of the underworld, his consort was going to start attempting to hatch stalagmites or try to breastfeed a particularly round mossy rock. Using the convenient excuse of diplomatic sequestering to dodge Lord Vesper's increasingly creative assassins, Sam packed a bag, mostly composed of industrial-strength SPF 50, 3 bags of teriyaki beef jerky, and Rodey's emotional support Snuggie. He whisked Rodey away to the Basking Isles, a series of jagged volcanic pillars rising out of a turquoise tropical sea. It was a place where the sun was a constant, heavy gold, and the only politics involved which rock was the warmest. Finally, Rodey sighed, dramatically collapsing off the boat and onto a beach of shimmering black sand. A honeymoon, just me, my scaly husband, and a complete lack of meddling snake mothers. If I see a single shoehorn on this island, Sam, I'm swimming back to the mainland. I'll take my chances with the sharks. At least they don't ask about grand eggs. This is a sanctuary, Sam-Uel promised, his scales shimmering like oil on water as he slithered onto the shore, his massive tail leaving a deep groove in the sand. No politics, no assassins, just synchronization, and perhaps a total lack of sarcasm for at least 48 hours. Don't push your luck, Sammy. Sarcasm is how I regulate my body temperature. Part 1. The Hammock Incident. The honeymoon suite was a luxury open-air hut built on stilts over the crystal-clear water. Its centerpiece was a king-sized hammock woven from indestructible jungle vines. To a human, it looked like a dream. To a Naga, it was a physics-based death trap. The chaos erupted the moment Sam-Uel tried to be romantic. He slithered into the hammock, intending to pull Rodey into a graceful, cinematic embrace. However, Sam weighed roughly as much as a small car. The moment his heavy coils settled into the mesh, the center of gravity vanished. The vines groaned, the tension snapped, and the weight distribution acted like a medieval catapult. Rodey, who had been lounging on the edge, was launched 3 feet into the air. He hit the thatched ceiling with a dull thump before falling directly onto Sam's midsection, which was currently knotted in a confused heap. "Great," Rodey wheezed, his face buried in Sam's scales. "Our first night of wedded bliss and I'm being used as a human stress ball. Is this the synchronization you mentioned? Or are you just trying to see if I bounce? Because I'm a person, Sam, not a Spalding basketball. I underestimated the elasticity of the flora." Sam grunted, trying to untangle his tail from the netting. Part 2. Tropical Shedding Part 2. The intense tropical humidity and the salt air triggered something in Sam's biology. A mid-season, stress-induced shed. Within 24 hours, he became itchy, irritable, and looked like he was wrapped in several layers of peeling, cloudy cling wrap. "Don't touch me," Sam hissed, huddled in the corner of the hut. "I am hideous. I am a jagged mess of keratin." "Oh, stop being a drama queen. You're just a giant, grumpy potato," Rodey countered. He spent the next 3 hours sitting behind Sam, meticulously peeling his husband. It was oddly satisfying, like picking at a giant sunburn. Rodey eventually found a particularly large, perfectly intact piece of translucent tailskin. He stood up and held it over his head like a shimmering trophy. "Look, I finally got the unabridged version of you. It's lightweight, waterproof, and slightly terrifying. I'm gonna make this into a rain poncho. It's designer. It's eau de serpent. I'll be the talk of the next gala." Sam's hood flared in sheer mortification. "If you put that on, Rodey, I am filing for an annulment. I will not be worn as a fashion accessory." Part 3. The Double Situation Renegotiation. One evening, under a moon so bright it turned the black sand to silver, the storage problem from the past reared its head again. They were lying by a small fire, the waves crashing rhythmically against the pillars. Sam was feeling romantic, his tail draped protectively over Rodey. Rodey, as usual, was feeling analytical. "Okay, Sammy, look, we're in paradise. The mood is right," Rodey said, propping himself up on one elbow. "But I've been thinking about the duplex again. If we're doing this, do I get to pick a primary and a secondary? Like, Is there a manager on duty and a night shift? Because I'm not a switchboard operator, Sam. I can't handle multiple incoming calls at once. I need a flowchart. Sam-Uel pulled his hood entirely over his face, a Naga gesture of wanting to spontaneously combust. I am a high lord of the coast, he muffled from behind the skin. I am a warrior. I am a leader of men. I should not be discussed like a telecommunications network or a customer service hotline. I'm just saying, I value efficiency. I need to know who's in charge of the Monday morning meeting. Part 4. The Return of the Sunstone. Despite Sam's pleas, Rodey had refused to leave his Sunstone 3000 heating rock behind. He carried it to the beach every day like a pampered pet. This led to a minor international incident. A group of local, non-Naga sea serpents, primitive, colorful creatures, spied Rodey nesting with the glowing white rock on his towel. In their tiny reptilian brains, they assumed Rodey was a rare, bipedal deity protecting a sacred, primordial egg. By noon, Rodey woke up from a nap to find himself surrounded. A dozen sea snakes were bowed in a circle around his beach towel, depositing small, dead crabs and shiny pieces of sea glass as tribute. Sam, look, I'm finally getting the respect I deserve, Rodey shouted, gesturing to his new cult. These guys don't care about my lack of scales or my cargo shorts. They just appreciate a man who knows how to properly incubate a space heater. Tax fraud would be so proud. I think I'm their pope now. Sam-Uel just sighed, watching a sea snake place a half-eaten shrimp on Rodey's knee. You are leading a religion based on a lie and a 200-watt heating element. This will not end well. Part 5. The Deep Sea Petting. The climax of the trip occurred during a midnight swim. In the water, Sam was a god, fast, silent, and terrifyingly powerful. Rodey, meanwhile, was a man in neon blue floaties trying not to swallow salt water. Suddenly, a Charlie horse ripped through Rodey's calf. Sam, cramp. I'm going down. Sam-Uel surged through the water like a torpedo to grab him. In the thrashing panic of the moment, Rodey's hand clawed for purchase and found that sweet spot at the base of Sam's spine, the neurological off switch. The result was a disaster. Sam immediately went limp. His brain short-circuited, his eyes rolled back, and he let out a long underwater mlem. Since Sam weighed 600 pounds of pure muscle, they both began sinking toward the reef like a pair of very handsome anchors. Rodey had to use every ounce of his spite strength to kick them back to the surface, dragging Sam's unconscious, blissed-out body onto the sand. I swear, Rodey panted, collapsing on the sand next to his dazed husband. This isn't a honeymoon. It's an episode of Man vs. Wild where the wild is a 10-foot noodle who can't handle a back scratch. I almost drowned because you have the constitution of a kitten. Sam-Uel opened one eye, his tongue flicking out in a confused daze. You are a very dangerous creature, Rodey. You possess weapons I do not understand. I know, babe, Rodey smirked, reaching for his heating rock to warm up. Now pass me the SPF 50. My leaky human skin is starting to crisp, and Marge will kill us both if I come home looking like a burnt panini. I refuse to be a charred sacrifice. Chapter 11. Exit Strategy. The Basking Isles were supposed to be a sanctuary, but the universe apparently had a sense of irony. On their final night, while the volcanic sand was still radiating the day's heat, a tear opened in the air behind the luxury hut. It wasn't a jagged rift of obsidian or a magical Naga portal. It was a clean, shimmering rectangle that smelled faintly of exhaust fumes, overpriced lattes, and industrial-strength floor wax. It was a doorway to New Jersey. Rodey stood at the edge of the portal, staring at the blurred silhouette of a 7-Eleven across the street. He looked down at his cargo shorts, then at his peeling, salt-crusted skin, and finally at Sam-Uel, who was watching him with an expression of paralyzed, golden-eyed dread. Wow, Rodey whispered, his voice cracking. The commute is surprisingly short. I thought there'd at least be a layover in purgatory or a connecting flight through a black hole. It is a cosmic realignment, Sam said, his voice sounding like it was being pulled from the bottom of a well. The bond has been stressed by the honeymoon. The universe is offering you a severance package. Rodey, you can walk through. The mark on your neck will fade. You will be unburdened. Rodey snorted, trying to find his footing on the shifting sand. Unburdened? Sam, I'm about to go back to a world where I have to pay taxes and the Wi-Fi drops if it rains. I should really leave a Yelp review for this dimension before I go. 1 star. The manager is a 10-foot snake who doesn't understand hammocks, and the mother-in-law is literally a hazard to your health. Pros: great heat lamps. Cons: lack of cheeseburgers. He took a step toward the shimmering light, his Converse clicking against a volcanic rock. So let's talk shop, Sammy. If I step through that door, what happens to the subscription of the scales? Do I just get a prorated refund on my soul? Or does the account stay active in case I want to come back for the holidays? Sam-Uel glided closer, his hood completely retracted, looking smaller than Rodey had ever seen him. For the first time, the High Lord was gone, leaving only the creature underneath. If you leave, Sam said, his voice a raw, honest rasp, the bond will not kill me. I told you that to keep you close. But the rot will not be in my scales, Rodey. It will be in the silence. My lineage will continue, Vesper will eventually be defeated, and the coast will endure. But the light in the Joga's suite will just be a lamp. It won't be home. I will simply be a predator again, waiting for a sun that isn't coming back. The honesty hit Rodey harder than the crisp blade ever could. It was a heavy, suffocating weight that made his lungs feel tight. He looked at the 7-Eleven, at the mundane, safe, boring world of slushies and stability, and then back at the monster who had accidentally become his center of gravity. God, you're so dramatic, Rodey joked, his voice hitching as he wiped a stray tear with the back of a salt-stained hand. You're like a Gothic poem, but with more scales and better abs. A son that isn't coming back? Seriously, Sam? Who's writing your material? You need a new publicist. If I leave, you'll probably just find a nice, quiet python who actually likes eating rats and doesn't complain about the lack of central heating. Rodey turned back to the portal, his hand hovering inches from the shimmering surface. I could have a 5G signal in 30 seconds, Sam. I could have a double bacon cheeseburger by midnight. I wouldn't have to worry about whether my children are going to be hatchlings or musical theater enthusiasts. The door remained open, humming with the sound of a distant car horn and the mundanity of Earth. But then again, Rodey whispered, his smirk returning, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I've already invested a lot of time in training you, and I still haven't seen you try to wear that rain poncho I made out of your skin. It would be a waste of a perfectly good fashion statement to leave now. He turned away from the portal and walked back toward the Naga, his heart hammering a frantic, human rhythm against his ribs. Besides, Rodey added, poking Sam's bronze chest, you'd be helpless without me. You'd probably try to marry a rock again, and we both know how that ends. Sam-Uel didn't speak. He just lunged forward, coiling his massive, warm body around Rodey, burying his face in the crook of the human's neck. The portal behind them flickered, hissed, and finally winked out of existence, leaving them alone in the tropical dark. I'm staying, you big noodle, Rodey muttered into Sam's shoulder. But I'm telling Marge that the portal was too small for my ego, and you're buying me a goddamn pizza the first chance we get. Chapter 12. The Trail. Rodey was lying on the hiking trail. That part at least seemed consistent. The ground pressed into his back in a way that felt unnegotiably real. Small stones digging through his shirt, damp earth cold against his spine. Somewhere near his ear, ants moved with the kind of purpose he had never once possessed. They climbed over his fingers without hesitation, unimpressed by the fact that he was, technically, dying. Wow, Rodey murmured, lips barely moving. Okay, so this is humbling. The sky above him was painfully blue. Not dramatic, not ominous, just rude in its normalcy. Leaves swayed gently, sunlight flickering through them like nothing interesting was happening at all. His ankle burned. No, burned was generous. It pulsed now, distant, like the pain had wandered off to do something else and forgotten to tell him where it went. That felt bad. He'd read enough WebMD to know that pain leaving was not a victory. His phone buzzed weakly in his pocket. Rodey frowned. Or at least he thought he did. His face felt far away. "If that's my mom," he whispered. "This is going to be very awkward." The buzzing stopped. Silence slid back in, thick and patient. In his head, the hall stretched on. Endless corridors of stone and moss, copper-veined walls glowing softly, furniture arranged with unsettling intention. Somewhere, a snake man was probably furious, or pacing, or standing very still in that way that meant someone else was about to have a terrible day. Rodey huffed out a quiet laugh. "Of course," he muttered. "Of course the afterlife is IKEA." He could almost hear it, the faint echo of hissing somewhere far off. Or maybe that was just the wind threading through the trees. It was hard to tell anymore where one thing ended and the other began. His fingers twitched. For a second, a dangerous second, it felt like something else twitched back. Like a pull. Like a thread tightening around his wrist. Rodey swallowed. "Hey!" he said softly, to no one in particular. "Just so we're clear. If you're real, you're absolutely impossible. And if you're not..." He paused, breath shallow. "Wow, my brain really went all out. Huh." The ants kept moving. Somewhere in the leaves, something hissed again. Closer this time. Or not. Rodey smiled, because even now, especially now, he couldn't help himself. "Figures," he whispered. "I finally get married. And I can't even tell which universe it happened in." The light flickered. The trail stayed exactly where it was. The ants kept moving. Rodey stared up at the trees, blinking slowly. "Okay," he whispered. "So either I'm dying," a pause, "or I married a snake." The forest stayed silent. Rodey exhaled, almost amused. "Honestly, I should have turned left." Something hissed. Or the wind did. Rodey never found out which.